In what was one of the biggest upsets in the history of U.S. presidential elections, Donald Trump achieved an electoral college victory over Hillary Rodham Clinton this week. Republicans also seized control, or rather maintained control of the House and the Senate. Trump's rhetoric, policy proposals, and possible cabinet members have left many, perhaps particularly those in marginalized communities, fearful. Through his campaign, Trump has perhaps best known for his flagship promise to build a wall between Mexico and the U.S. to keep Mexicans from immigrating stateside. With us to discuss this is Elizabeth Alex. She is the regional director of CASA Baltimore. CASA Baltimore is the Baltimore chapter of CASA Maryland, a Latino and immigration advocacy and assistance organization. Elizabeth Alex, welcome to The Real News.
Thank you so much, Sean.
So why don't we try to unpack, because I know that your organization has been inundated with people calling, wondering, what does this mean? What does a Trump victory, what does a President-elect Trump mean to so many people in the Latino community here and across the country, obviously? Let's unpack the main concerns that people have expressed to you so far.
Sure. So, I mean, we all heard it, right? On the campaign trail, several of the returning themes of Donald Trump's campaign were building the wall, his deportation force, that he would cancel all of the work permits that were issued under President Obama's executive action, that he would further increase militarization on the southern border of the United States. All of those things obviously cause fear in the community. So we've for the last several days just been inundated with these calls, questions, tears, families coming in and saying, what does this mean? What does this mean for me? What does this mean for my child? Is there anything I can do? We have young people, there are several thousand young people in Baltimore City alone who have work authorization, temporary work authorization through the president's executive order, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrival. And those young people, many of them are in college now, some of them are in professional careers, and there are actually several businesses that are dependent on those workers now. They're saying, well, what does this mean? Will my, for a brief period of time, I was able to come out of the shadows, get a real job, go to college. Sure. Some of them have bought homes in the city, and they're saying, what happens to all that? Do I have to go back to that shadow of that former self that I used to be? What path forward is there for me?
And of course, what Donald Trump has what he has said, not what he suggested, is that he wants to repeal all of President Obama's, or most of President Obama's executive orders, and amongst those is the DACA mandate.
Sure.
What is just that possibility? What does that mean for the constituents, the people that you advocate for?
Yeah, and that's what we're all grappling with, right? Because never in history have we had some sort of a group of people that is given some sort of temporary immigration status, and that quickly turned over into a list of people to be deported. Right. So we are hopeful that this will not be the first time. We're hopeful that what he intends to do is simply cancel the program such that new people will not be able to apply, but that he won't then turn this massive database of millions of kids throughout the United States and turn them over for immediate deportation. That would be the worst case scenario.
There have been some discrepancies over the exit polling that has shown perhaps as many as 29% of Hispanics, Latinos voted for Donald Trump, which, even though that the percentage is lower than it was in 2008, I believe, because there have been so many Latinos added to the voting rolls, so many registered, it was actually an increase. First of all, the controversy over the exit polling, and Latino leaders are coming out and saying they dispute the exit polling. What is at the core of the discrepancy? What are your thoughts about that?
I mean, I think we're really going to have to wait until the voter rolls are updated to find out what really happened, right? But I think, and that we're hearing this not just in the Latino community, but in a lot of communities, where folks are saying that people are saying one thing at the exit poll, and they actually voted in a different way. There's also some confusion, right, about who's Latino. As we know, Latinos look sometimes as white as me or as dark as you, right, and everywhere in between, and so that's always a question.
Why don't we? I think that it would be helpful for a lot of people to define, for lack of a better term, Hispanic and Latino, because they don't mean the same thing, obviously.
So generally, Hispanic is a term used for anyone who speaks Spanish, including people from Spain in Europe. And it purposely, because of that definition, it excludes large parts of Latin America, including the largest country in South America, Brazil, right, where Portuguese is the language. And so usually we talk about Latino or Latinx, because that's more inclusive of women, as the more inclusive group, if we're trying to talk about people who are from South, Central America, and the Caribbean.
From where you are today, what do you believe that he can and can't do as President of the United States? I mean, this whole notion of assembling a deportation force and going and ripping families apart, ripping men, women, and children from their homes, their businesses, their schools, that is a horrific scenario. It's a doomsday scenario, quite frankly, in the minds of many people. But I mean, from where you stand right now, obviously, again, only 48, 72 hours, whatever, since Election Day, what is it that you believe, or what are you all strategizing to do in the wake of a Trump presidency?
I mean, I think we're preparing for the worst case scenario, right? We're helping individuals and families prepare for what can I do starting now to protect myself, to protect my family, and to defend my community. And so that's both like personal things, legal things they can have in place so that somebody can take care of their children, those types of things, but also really proactive strategies of what can we begin to be doing now to organize, build out our networks, and really fight back. Because we know that several of the things that President Trump has promised to do are outright illegal and unconstitutional, right? And so we also need to educate ourselves and our community and be aware so that as soon as we see something that is actually not legal, we're able to fight back.
The pursuit of certain policies locally, I've been arguing on my radio show that local agitation and local action is perhaps maybe a more effective way of insulating our communities and protecting our communities as opposed to trying to fight on a national level. What do you think about that, the possibility of being able to really agitate and move your people locally to create safe spaces, for lack of a better term? What are your thoughts about that?
So I completely agree. Immigration, sort of by definition, is a federal issue, but for so many years, I've been working in this field for 15 years, and we have yet to see any kind of comprehensive reform at the federal level. Right. So all real movement, except for the president's executive order, has actually been at the local and state level. So we're actually working right now to make Baltimore, or keep Baltimore, one of those safe spaces. Several years back, Mayor Stephanie Rawlings Blake issued an executive order trying to really delineate this is the role of police and this is the role of immigration. We're actually calling on her and on Catherine Pugh to issue a joint statement reiterating that message and really putting in place some pieces that will protect our community and keep Baltimore a welcoming city for immigrants.
You mentioned Catherine Pugh, the former state senator, is now the mayor-elect of Baltimore City. What are your thoughts about the fact that, she won in a landslide victory, obviously. Are you confident that what you just laid out will actually transpire, that she will kind of carry over some of the positions that have been pro-immigrant and pro the Latino community, will carry them over as the next mayor of Baltimore?
No, I haven't spoken with her since Tuesday.
Okay.
But I'm hopeful that based on her, her long voting record in the Senate, where she has never not supported the pro-immigrant legislation that we've passed. And Maryland is actually, one of the better states to live in if you're an immigrant, and Baltimore is one of the better cities to live in if you're an immigrant as a result of a lot of that legislation. But I haven't spoken with her since Tuesday, so I hope that she'll be up to the challenge. She's a smart woman. She understands that immigrants are really good for Baltimore's economy. They're good for our communities, and it's in all of our best interest to keep Baltimore a welcoming place for immigrants.
The devastating, in many people's minds, devastating Department of Justice report pattern or practice report against the Baltimore City Police Department, much has been made about the impact on the black community. Many people believe that it only affirmed what so many black people already know, but the impact is not just on the black community, but on the brown community as well. Sure. Given the fact that Donald Trump is now the president-elect and has suggested or said that he would implement a national stop and frisk policing policy. We know what transpired in New York during those years under stop and frisk. Literally millions of black and brown men were stopped unlawfully in that city over a course of several years. What are your thoughts about what a national policing policy of stop and frisk, perhaps a national policing policy of zero tolerance, the impact it has on the Latino community?
On all of us, right? I mean, this would take us back 20 years in terms of policing. I think one thing that really needs to happen is we need to finish our consent decree now, while we have a Department of Justice, right. And I think we need to put as many maybe stopgaps in there as possible to really guide how that could look at the local level. And again, I think it's going to come back to individuals, families, and communities being prepared to protect themselves, to know their own rights, to be able to be prepared at a very grassroots and community level to protect each other, as well as sort of building our legal structures in place so that we are ready to fight back through the court system if we need to when we see unlawful policing happening. You'll notice in the Department of Justice report, there's no mention anywhere of impact on Latinos. That is
what in your mind? What is? I mean,
that's my theory, and I wrote a long letter to the DOJ about this. My theory is that's because the city police department doesn't have records that actually track people by ethnicity. So I think that there was no data for the Department of Justice to actually look at. Now, this is something that we've been working with the commissioner and pushing him on, and I think we have some baby steps in place. I'm hopeful that this is another thing that can come out of the consent decree process and any reforms that happen here at the local level, because we know, right, on the street, we know that there are people who are maybe disproportionately targeted Sure. because of the way they look, or the language that they speak, or the neighborhood that they're walking in. But we also know that that's not systematically tracked in the way that it should be, and so it makes it very hard to make a larger legal case, if you will, or even an advocacy case.
Right. Final question that I have. A partnership between the Latino and Black community in Baltimore, I'll just say specifically in Baltimore, seems in the minds of most people to be a natural sort of thing. It should be a natural allegiance or alliance rather. But I always hear grumblings between both communities, a distrust, a dis-ease, if you will, within certain sections, within certain factions. What, from your perspective and your position at CASA and the work that you've done, why is that, and how do we perhaps take steps to smooth that out and kind of build bridges, if you will, mm-hmm. in our communities? Mm-hmm.
So I think when you talk to folks that are engaging in organizing and the real work around activism and organizing, those folks tend to have a very different way that they are relating and much more open and positive about that collaboration. Right. I think when you talk to folks who are just going to work, going to school, coming home every day, that's where you have a different mindset on all sides, right? And so I think what we've sort of adopted as a strategy is to begin to bring people together in the places that they share on a normal everyday basis, in your neighborhood, on your street, in your school, in your workplace, and begin to start breaking down stereotypes, building relationships, because at the bottom line, people are people, right? And so if we can begin to help folks realize what do they have in common, I think we'll be in a much better place.
I lied. I said that was my last question. I have one more.
That's all right.
There has been, in the wake of Election Day, there have been several incidents of young people, teenagers in high school, middle school, even in college, harassing, bullying Latino kids, Black kids. I had on my show.
Kids, yeah.
I had on my show yesterday, a couple of days ago, a young lady who was being bullied by a young white boy in high school, talking about building a wall and drawing pictures of walls on her paper, on her notebook. She had to go to the administrator and go to her mother to stop this from happening. But it's happening all over the country. What do we say to young people who may be Latino, may be Black, maybe and are encountering this type of Trumpism, if you will, in their schools? What do we say to those young people?
We got your back. I mean, I think that's the first thing. People need to know that somebody wants to support them. They need to report that stuff. And then if they don't get the response, that they need to find help somewhere else. You know, we're happy for any of those folks. We had a meeting last night in Southeast Baltimore. We had about 150 people there. And we said that very clearly. We said, if this happens to you or somebody you know, you report it to your principal immediately. If you don't get a response, come to us and we'll go with you. Or if you're scared to go talk to your principal or your school police officer, come to us. We'll go with you. Because it's so critical. We actually just urged Dr. Santelises, the CEO of schools, to do what some other jurisdictions have done around the state and country, to issue these letters home to every single parent of the city school system saying this type of behavior is absolutely unacceptable. It will not be tolerated. Because people need to know, students need to know that no matter what President Trump does or says, there are things that are simply not acceptable in our schools.
Absolutely. Elizabeth Alex is the Regional Director of CASA Baltimore. Elizabeth Alex, thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much, Sean.
Sure. I'm Sean Yost for The Real News.